So a few years ago, I prematurely declared the death of the non-Android based digital audio player. At the time, FiiO had basically said that they're not going to make any other audio players that are not Android based, and it was basically just hibi still making them. Sometimes it was Shanling, but it was basically just hibi. But I missed a company. I forgot about Hidizs, who's been doing this thing the whole time, and now we've got a later one. Back then, I think in 2020 was actually the last Hidizs audio player I reviewed. I think it was the original AP80. They since released in 2022, I think was the last one, the AP80 Pro X, and now we're taking a look at the latest Hidizs audio player, the AP80 Pro Max. Hey folks, I'm Mark Ryan. This is Super Review, and of course, we're taking a look at the latest Hidizs player, which is not just a Hidizs player. It's actually in collaboration with Linsoul, which is interesting. I haven't seen, I guess maybe I have seen, but it's a little bit out of the ordinary to see an audio player collaborating with a retailer like Linsoul to bring us this new player. Now, what's different about this player versus the AP80 Pro X that came out a couple of years ago? Well, as far as I can tell on paper, because I never did use that one, my understanding is that the Pro X was still using 2.5 millimeter for its balance connection, which feels a little bit hard to believe, but I guess in 2022, maybe that was viable. But here, of course, with the AP80 Pro Max, we've got a 4.4 mil balance connector, which is nice to see. What else do we got? We've got kind of like a new, smaller, more compact form factor, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And I guess the last thing to call out on this thing is that it is being launched on Kickstarter. I think the Kickstarter is, as of this recording and probably the first couple of days this video is up, it is still live. If you want to get in early in the Kickstarter, it is up. I'll have it linked in the description down below. But the price on this player is, in my understanding again, the price is going to be $240 US retail after the Kickstarter. During the Kickstarter, as is customary, you can get it a little bit cheaper. Initially, I think it was 140 bucks. It looks like the price might go up to 160 bucks. And well, how does that compare to other audio players that you can get for around that price? Well, for the past couple of weeks, I've been listening to, playing with the AP80 Pro Max, and I'm ready to let you know what I think. But before we do that, I get a quick shout out to Linsoul for sending in this player for review. If you want to check out the AP80 Pro Max, of course, I'll have it linked in the description. I have it linked on Linsoul as well as to the Kickstarter where you can check it out. But with that said, let's go to the table. We'll talk about what you get inside the box of the AP80 Pro Max. We'll talk about the build quality in this thing, and then we're going to dive into the functionality in this player, because audio players, in my mind, are basically all about the functionality. We'll talk a little bit about the sound, but I'll be honest, I'm not a big sound quality reviewer when it comes to audio players, because I think they mostly sound the same. And this one does sound good, I'll say that. But yeah, again, mostly we're going to talk about the functionality in this little player. And yeah, with that said, here is the box. It is a cute little box, and this player comes in 3 different colors. I've got here the black version. It looks like it comes in kind of like a gunmetal gray option as well as a blue color, which is kind of striking. But we'll talk about the build quality in this thing in a little bit. What you get inside the box is a postcard of sorts. You don't get the bandaged thumb. That was me like literally 5 minutes ago before hitting record in this video. I sliced my finger off, so you'll have to deal with that. But you don't have to deal with that if you buy this. I have to deal with that. But inside the box, you do get 2 little plastic screen covers. There are actually pre-installed screen covers, both front and back, because this thing is glass all the way around. But if you need to replace them at any point, they've got replacements in the box. I'll say this, I take them off. I'm personally not a big fan of plastic screen covers because I want to feel glass. I want to touch glass. That's what the kids say when using an audio player like this, and having a plastic screen protector on it, you know, maybe it will protect my thing from scratches, but I'd rather risk it. Apart from that, let's move that stuff to the side. You do also get a couple of USB-C cables, which is interesting to see. One of them is a longer, probably like a 3-foot cable that goes USB-C on one end to USB-A on the other. You would ostensibly plug this into maybe a laptop or a computer to charge it, or most likely you'd plug this into a charging brick. And then down here you have a much shorter, like a 6-inch cable that is just USB-C to C, because you could, if you wanted to, plug it into this player, connect it directly to your phone, and kind of use this as an external DAC for your phone. Basically, use this as kind of like a glorified dongle, although it is indeed a fully fledged digital audio player, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But it's kind of cool that it has that functionality because it is such a nice compact little player. Now, that will bring us into talking about the build quality on the unit itself. And I've already kind of given you a hint that it is a nicely built unit. It has got glass on both the front and the back. The rails are made entirely of aluminum. So basically everything that you're touching when you're holding this little audio player is just premium materials. It feels really nice. It's got a nice density about it. It doesn't feel overly heavy because, well, it is a very compact player. Let me give you for context, all right? This is an iPhone mini, okay? For context. This is an iPhone mini. This is the Hidizs. So much, much smaller over here on this little player, but again, it feels nice and quality in the hands. Now, a little bit of a tour on the hardware itself. You do have a micro SD card slot over here on the left side. On the right side, you've got buttons, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a bit. And then on the bottom, you've got your Type-C USB for charging as well as data connection, and then your 2 headphone jacks. So you've got 3.5mm single-ended as well as a 4.4mm balance connector. So you do have both of those. And I like that they are on the bottom. That is my preferred place to have headphone jacks on a digital audio player like this. Although my understanding is that about 33% of people prefer to have them on the top, which, yeah, unfortunately, you're just gonna have to deal with it. Now, okay, I already alluded to, we're gonna talk about the buttons over here on the right side of this player. This is, I think, a good layout for buttons. You basically just have 3 main buttons. You've got play, pause, and you've got previous track, and you've got next track, which is basically what you want. You do, of course, also have volume control over here on this knob, and the knob is also clickable, so you can turn the screen on and off or power the unit off if you press and hold it for a long time. I like this because, look, a lot of players will either like there's basically 6 buttons here, right? There's basically volume up, volume down, power on, power off, plus these 3 buttons over here. And that can be a lot to have on one side of an audio player if they're all individual buttons like this. But because they put those functions into a little knob like this, it just makes it a lot easier to hand feel and be able to use the player without looking at it. And that is, for me, like, honestly, like one of the big reasons I love digital audio players is I just like having a product, a music listening device that I don't have to look at to operate, play and pause music. Now, I will say that I do wish that these buttons were a little bit more differentiated. The fact that there's only 3 of them makes it not such a big deal, but if they were a little bit more differentiated, maybe if there was like an obvious dot or something on the center, it'd be a little bit easier to use it without looking at it. But again, it's pretty easy to tell that this is the top one, this is the bottom one, and then this one is surrounded by buttons. Ergo, it is the center one. Now, the knob itself, let me just say this. I'm kind of a mixed opinion when it comes to volume knobs on digital audio players. On the one hand, well, I like knobs. I think knobs are great. And then they also do, again, they allow you to have all of the buttons on one side of an audio player without it being confusing to feel. The downside with having a knob for volume control is actually 2 things. The one thing I always talk about is just that if you're putting this thing in and out of your pocket, having a knob is just more likely to accidentally get triggered as you put it into your pocket or take it out, right? It's just more likely to accidentally get caught by the cloth of your pocket and change the volume when you don't want. The other downside, and this is something I don't really talk about too much, but I probably should just make a bigger point of it, it's just like it becomes a little bit slow to change the volume, right? It's like, you see how many times I'm having to twist this knob to get from 0 to 100 volume, and kind of the same thing, all right? We're going, which it's probably not a big deal most of the time, but if you are going between IEMs and full-size headphones, it can mean that, yeah, sometimes you're gonna have to go from using very little power to a lot of power, and it just means that you're gonna have to be turning this knob a lot to get to the correct volume settings. Or like the real downside of this is like you were listening to a headphone, let's say at like 80 out of 100 volume, and then you go to an IEM that you need only at like 10 or 20 out of 100. You might accidentally blast your ears off with the music, and it's gonna take you a while to get the volume down to a good point. Whereas when you have a button, you can usually just press and hold it, and it'll ramp down much, much faster. So again, I'm kind of a mixed opinion. I like a good knob, but there are some trade-offs to it. Now you might have noticed too, as I'm like hammering on this knob, a good thing about this knob, and this is another kind of trade-off with knobs like these that double as a power button, a lot of the times I'll accidentally trigger the screen on-off button just by doing this. But you might have noticed I just did this a bunch of times and I didn't do it once. So generally pretty good execution on the knob here by Hidizs. So I dig that. Okay, anything else to talk about the physical form factor? I guess I will just point out the knob is a little wobbly, but not so wobbly that I'm concerned about it. I think the build quality in this unit is generally pretty nice. I guess just a note on aesthetics, you know, there are some angles and stuff carved into the shape of this player, which I think look kind of cool, but they're also a little bit on the random side. You know, it's a little asymmetrical, which is a look if you're into it. Personally, I prefer a symmetrical look. Small point, but and then the last thing I'll also point out, there is a little LED over here on the right side of the player, which by default is basically just always on when you're playing music. I think it changes color to indicate the quality, the bit rate, the sample rate of the music that you're listening to. But I don't need that in my life. In fact, I don't like having a light on these players that's on all the time, because a lot of the times I actually use these players in bed, and well, thankfully you can turn it off. Okay, anything else to talk about the build quality? Just checking my notes. I guess also just to briefly note, I talked about this thing does come in different colors available. I was looking at their Kickstarter page just before recording, and it looks like they do also offer it in, they're making 699, it's a weird number. Maybe they're trying to be nice. 699 all copper units that are made entirely of copper rather than the aluminum that you see here. And ostensibly the color of that is going to be a little bit different as well. It is more expensive for the all copper version. And I will also just kind of, with a bit of a cringe, note that they say that it changes the sound quality of the unit. Here, I'm gonna read this, I'm gonna quote them. They say, unlike traditional aluminum builds, the copper body adds greater tonal depth and richness, giving music a warm or smooth analog-like warmth, especially in the mid-range and the bass. I don't believe that. If there is a difference to the sound, it would be something that they would be doing intentionally with like DSP or something like that. But yeah, I don't know, if you're looking at the all copper version, I would go into buying that just because you want it to be made out of all copper, not because you're expecting it to sound different. Now, again, I have not heard it myself, so maybe I'm full of crap, but I feel like that description of what a copper build does to the sound is a little bit full of crap. But let's dive into talking about the player now, talking about the functionality of this little guy. You know, generally I'll give you kind of a tour of the UI here. You've been looking at the playing screen where I've got Honey Glaze loaded up. So you can see that it does show you your album arts, which is nice, but the UI is basically, this is basically just Hibi OS, right? So if you've seen any other of Hidizs audio players, I mentioned Hibi is one of the companies still making non-Android based audio players. These two are examples of it. They're using the exact same operating system. Okay, I say exact same. There's gonna be like small differences in terms of how they configure it, what hardware is on the unit and how it's compatible with it. So there's gonna be small differences, but basically everything that I've ever talked about those Hibi players is basically gonna be true here. So the general UI is not bad. You know, you got nice large touch screen buttons to deal with. You have fairly robust settings where, oh, there you go. Again, you can turn the LED indicator on and off. Look at that. Do you want a blue light? I don't want that. I can turn it off. Thank you. Yeah, there's a bunch of settings that you can dive into, and we'll talk about some of the functionality that they control in a bit. But yeah, just suffice to say that it is generally a nice operating system, but it's also, it's a little bit limited. Like when I did my review of this Hibi player, which came out a couple of months ago, I compared it to an iPod from like 2005 or something like that. And I still feel like the UI on the iPod from 2005 is better than Hibi OS's today. Now there's a lot more features in Hibi OS, but in terms of just using the product, scrolling through your media and stuff like that, I feel like Hibi OS is still not the best. It's decent. And I guess I'll give you a bit of a demonstration of that here. So you can dive into music. It organizes your music like so. I typically go to artists and I will browse my music by artist. So you can see that the scrolling is a little bit on the chonky side, just in terms of the refresh rate of the screen, but it does show you this little shortcut menu over here on the left, so you can navigate your list pretty quickly, which I like to see. Same downside with Hibi though, is that while that menu is up, let's see if I can demonstrate this. tapping doesn't work. So you have to wait for it to go away, and then you get accidental taps. Same issue I've had before. Let's see. So yeah, and then I tap into, I see my albums by that artist. These are all my FKJ albums. And then if you want to dive into there, you've got your songs, you tap it, it starts playing the music. And if I swipe over here, you can see that I've got my music playing. So that's kind of the general gist of the UI that you're going to be dealing with when you're using this little player. It's obviously not the entirety of the UI here, but it is the bulk of what you'll be dealing with. Now, again, a couple of small complaints. Again, I apologize if you've seen my other reviews of Hibby stuff, because these are going to be the same kind of complaints. But like, I don't love that all of the artists get categorized down here with the T's, right? I want the artists, sorry, I want the Cure to be categorized with the C's. But if I go to the C's, there's no Cure here. They're under the, which I don't love. Another thing I don't love is that I can't listen to just all songs by an artist. A lot of the times what I want to do, especially with Cigarettes After Sex, this is a good example. This music is just fantastic sleeping music, and I want to fall asleep with these albums playing from beginning to end, from one album to the next. And there's just no way to do that. You can go here and tap in and list all of the songs by them, but as you can see, they're played in alphabetical order rather than in the order of the album. So if you want to listen to all albums in order, you just have to kind of do it manually, or I guess create playlists or something like that. So unfortunately, that's a bit of a bummer. Other things to say about this, I mean, I guess I'll also just highlight one other kind of quirk about this. If you're looking in the settings and you're not finding the setting that you're looking for, it might be because they've got two different settings, right? They've got system settings, and then when you go into music, there's a separate music settings. And up here is where you would find things like Equalizer and being able to update the database. So that's kind of a general gist of the UI here. You can also just navigate stuff directly on the memory card rather than having to use ID3 tags. But if you use ID3 tags like I do, everything gets organized kind of automatically, and you just have to scan your music to get that organization. All right, anything else? Okay, I can do ebooks. Let's talk about some of the other functionality that's on here, because there are some interesting things, although I don't know that the functionality is all quite there yet. So I did mention that this could be used as an external DAC amp, right? So you could connect this, let's say plug this into, use this little shorty cable, and then let's say you could plug in your phone via USB and basically use this as a DAC amp for your phone or your laptop if you wanted to. There was, unfortunately, a little bit of latency when I was doing that. So like even watching YouTube videos, the audio was a little bit delayed past the lips. It wasn't to the point that like it was unwatchable or anything like that, but if you are looking for something that you could use for gaming, I don't know that this level of latency would be really acceptable for gaming, so not that great. For music, obviously it's fine. You're not even gonna notice that there is latency. You can also ostensibly use this thing as a Bluetooth transmitter, right? So I could Bluetooth to my phone and then play audio from my phone through this, which is cool because, you know, you have things like the Qtelix 5K or the Fiophile BTR17, which are bespoke products that do that. They aren't audio players, they're just Bluetooth transmitters. And this thing is like kind of small enough that you could almost just use it in place of those. Plus it has DAP functionality built in. But unfortunately, I just honestly couldn't get it to work using either my iPhone or my MacBook. So I'm not sure if that's functionality that's going to be coming with a firmware update, and it is possible to update the firmware. I guess just to highlight this, you can do it all over Wi-Fi, which is pretty cool. But also just to show, highlight, I have Wi-Fi turned off. But anyway, I have the latest firmware, and at least on the version of firmware I've got right now, I could not get the Bluetooth functionality to work. Some other things that this thing supports that I just haven't played with because I don't subscribe to these services is that it does support, I'll punch in on this, Tidal and Qobuz streaming. Again, not services I can tell you exactly how they integrate with this player because I don't subscribe to these services personally. I personally use Apple Music and Spotify, but it does have those, which is pretty cool, I think. And yeah, but mostly I'm just honestly using this to play music that is on my micro SD card. And I believe as far as like SD cards, what it supports, I'm pretty sure it supports up to 2 terabyte SD cards, which is way more than enough. I use a 128 gig size memory card on all my players, basically because I need a bunch of them and they're cheap. And well, my library doesn't need to be that big. So yeah, anything else to talk about there? Okay, I did want to talk about the equalizer, right? Because I mentioned briefly, we'll go back into this. If you go into the music section of the player and go up here, there are a couple of different options for equalizer. And this is cool, right? You've got MSEB. If you're not familiar with this, this is like Hidizs kind of their own branded version of EQ, where they, rather than giving you like just frequencies and gain levels and Q factors, like if you're not familiar with all that stuff, like this is just like a much more human readable version of EQ, right? You can play around with audiophile terms, right? Make the note thickness, you know, more crisp or more thick. You make the vocals more recessed or more forward. And like this is actually kind of a cool way to play around with EQ. But if you're not into that, there is also just kind of a traditional 10-band EQ here. Sorry, I have to turn it on in order to even play around with it. But you know, you got your traditional 10-band EQ, which is certainly very useful. Now, a couple of limitations just to kind of highlight on this thing. One, on the Kickstarter page, they do list parametric EQ as something that's supported in this, but it's not here right now. Again, I have the latest version of the firmware. There's no parametric EQ, so I can't tell you how it works, or if it's actually coming. My understanding, and I've seen this mentioned, is that it is coming, but I wouldn't expect it. I wouldn't bank on it, because even then, once it is done, I don't know what the execution of it would look like. The other thing to talk about the EQ, and another kind of limitation here, this is just a limitation of the Hibi OS, I don't know why, is that it doesn't work with high-res music. If you're using high-res music, your EQ changes just will not apply, which I'm not like a big high-res music guy, so like I kind of don't really care from that perspective, but some of my music just happens to be high-res, and well, that music, unfortunately, it doesn't get the EQ applied. So for me, as far as I'm concerned, while there are some pretty interesting EQ features on this device, they're just really not that useful to me because of those limitations. Apart from that, other functionality we can talk about is just the battery life on this unit, which is not the strongest. Maybe you would expect, because it's, you know, such a small, compact little player. They predict, I think, between 10 to 12 hours of battery life on 3.5 mil. And as is typical on the balance connector, you get less battery life, between, they claim, 8 to 10 hours. I'm gonna say the 10 hours seems pretty accurate for me on single-ended, because I would take this thing to sleep, right? It's about 7 or 8 hours. Let's be honest, about 7 hours if I'm lucky. And it would be well below 50% battery life in the morning. So yeah, I would say 10 hours is about as much as I would expect this thing to get at my listening volumes using IEMs on single-ended connection, which is a little bit on the weak side. You know, some of these audio players like this Hibi R1, I don't think the battery life is much better on this thing. The battery life on this one is quite a bit better, I believe. I think it was like closer to like 15, maybe even 20 hours. So you can get better battery life out of a player, but this one is, you know, as you can see, it's quite a bit chonkier, right? So it's got a bigger battery in it, but it's also a little bit chonky. So yeah, I don't know. I didn't love the battery life on this thing. I think the bigger issue that I had with this player, honestly, besides just the playtime battery life, is the standby battery life. Now they claim like 60 days of standby, and I'm not sure what settings they're using to do that, because I went in here, and like I mentioned, there is a plethora of different settings, and maybe I've just got it in the wrong set of settings. But I have idle shutdown turned off, because I don't want the unit to turn itself completely off, because you have to power it back on, which you can do, and it's quicker than, you know, a typical Android player is going to be, but I don't want it to do that. I want to just go into kind of like a sleep mode. So there is a standby mode, and I have standby mode engaged. But even with this, basically I had these two units in exactly the same standby sleep mode settings, like match those exactly. And after a few days, like this thing was drained by about 30%, whereas this thing would be drained by like 1%. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on. I don't think I had Wi-Fi even turned on this thing, so I don't think that was draining it. Just my experience, and honestly part of why my review on this thing is coming now rather than like a week ago, was because I was continually testing the battery life stuff. And yeah, it just didn't seem like it was very strong in terms of standby life. As I'm mentioning that too, I'm actually reminding myself something I should have talked about earlier when I was talking about the screen on this player. That's not what I wanted to show you. But now that we're here, enjoy it. No, what I wanted to show you is just how dang small this font is up here. Now, I know you could probably read it if you're looking at it now on a full-size screen, But I can tell you right now, me looking at it with my reading glasses, I can't read what it says up there. I mean, I can kind of guess. Is that? No, even looking at it over here, I'm not even totally sure. Does that say 16 o'clock? 16? I don't know. Like, it's just way too small. And I don't really understand why it's that small, because we've got this other hibi player over here, which has a screen that's, as far as I can tell, basically the same size. But this one, yeah, plenty readable. This guy over here, not very readable. I can tell that it's got 55% battery life. Can't really tell that with my glasses unless I squint. And then the other problem I have is that if I change the volume, and it's not doing it here, I don't know in what scenarios it does, it'll turn the volume red. Maybe I have to have a headphone connected. It'll turn the volume level red. And then when it's red and this small on a dark background, it's just like even more invisible. But that was our side grade back into, we digressed, but we're back to talking about the functionality in this thing. Okay. I don't think there's anything more I can say about the features and functionality, battery life. Like, it is what it is. It's basically another little hibi player, but it is made by Hidizs and slightly different form factor. There you go. Now, in terms of sound, this is what you're all waiting for, right? The sound review of the Hidizs player. I'm going to say this right now. It sounds good. It sounds very good. But most of these do. Okay, it is using, I believe, ESS DACs, a couple of ESS DACs, because it does, again, support balanced output. And the power ratings on this thing, I believe, are, they listed a little bit awkwardly. They list the left and right channel separately, but it's basically 140 milliwatts at 32 ohms on 3.5 mil, and then 280 milliwatts of power at 32 ohms on 4.4 mil. Both of those are fantastic values. Like, those are plenty of power to do basically anything you want with a digital audio player. If anyone's telling you that you need more power than you get on this little player to drive your headphones, there might be some headphones out there that is true of, but I'll say this, I don't own them, right? I use my HD 600s, which, okay, not the most insanely difficult headphone to drive, but on single-ended 3.5 mil on low gain, these things were loud enough for me at about 80 out of 100 volume. At 100 out of 100 volume, this was too loud for me on those headphones, right? On low gain again. And then that doesn't even account for, there are separate gain settings, which I'm not seeing here because I don't have a headphone attached, but I promise you, there are gain settings. So plenty of power, and that's, again, just on single-ended. You get more power on balance. Now, in terms of other things about how it sounds, I did measure the frequency response of this unit just to kind of make sure, and yeah, like, as is typical, the frequency response is flat. There's no coloration to the tuning, which is exactly what I want. I don't want these audio players imparting some sort of tonal balance on the sound. It's not complicated. Make it sound nice and clean and neutral. And that's exactly what this player does. Now, in terms of, I guess, cleanness, let's talk about noise floor. I don't have it. No, I do. Here we go. Here's my noise floor test, which is the Campfire Audio Aura. This is the most sensitive IEM that I have. And what I do is I'll plug it into a player like this on both single-ended and balanced, and I'll play a track, which I think I even shared this publicly if anyone's interested. But I'll play a track, which I've got down here. Hold on, see if I can navigate this thing. Sounds, that is the sound floor. And basically what this does is this just plays silence, plus like a ping sound every once in a while to let me know that it's actually working, so that I can hear what the noise floor of this device would be while music is playing. But I don't have to have music in the way, so I can actually hear how loud it is. And on this player, on the Campfire Audio Aura, again, I'm most sensitive IEM, on 3.5, I can hear the noise floor. It's there. It's very noticeable, but it's not to the point that it's a big concern for me, to be honest. It's about on par with my favorite audio player, which is this, the Hibi R5 Gen 2. Which, again, also not the best noise floor performance. So, again, this is not the best noise floor performance there is out there, but it's good enough that it's not really a concern for me. On the 4.4 mil, it did seem like it was a little bit stronger on the hiss, but even then, like, I'd still be comfortable listening to the Aura. So, yeah, generally okay on the noise floor performance. And then in terms of the output impedance, I couldn't find any output impedance measurements on their Kickstarter page. But I did, when I was measuring the frequency response of the Aura, basically what I did was I measured the frequency response of this with an Apple dongle, and then I compared it to this, using this as a external DAC amp, both in single-ended and 3.5 mil. It did seem like the 4.4 mil, sorry, yeah, the 4.4, it seemed like the balance connector does have a little bit higher output impedance, so the tonal balance of this did shift just ever so slightly to being a little bit brighter, because that's what this IEM does when you give it output impedance. But it was a very, very minor amount. So yeah, I would expect that this is, you know, within the realm of probably 1.5 ohms of output impedance on 4.4. I don't know. I think that's pretty much as I can tell you about this audio player. I'll briefly bring these other players in for just kind of a comparison. Like, these are all kind of roughly the same. Like, there's not much that differentiates them. These ones do have, I think, a better processor than this one, so the UI might be a little bit snappier, but most of the limitations of the Hibi OS are going to be shared in common with all of these. You know, this one is made out of plastic. It's a little bit lighter weight, doesn't have a balance connector on it, if that's important to you, but it is quite a bit cheaper at, I think, like 85 bucks. This one, the R3 Pro 2, thank you for that sticker for reminding me that collection of numbers and letters. This one has a balance connector on it. It's quite a bit more expensive. I think the price on this is closer to the price on this. It's about 200 bucks. I don't really understand, honestly, why this one is $240 at its MSRP. I think the Kickstarter price is like reasonable at around 160 bucks, but its MSRP of 240 bucks just starts to make me wonder, like, I don't really understand why I would want to buy one of, frankly, any of these players when this exists, which is the Hibi M300. This is an Android-based audio player. And, well, it's got better battery life, much better performance. Okay, it's only got 3.5 mil single-ended, but this is just, for me, the much better experience at basically the same price. In fact, these are about 160, 170 bucks, brand new all day, whereas this is 160 bucks right now if you get it early on Kickstarter, so you maybe save 10 bucks. But I think the experience for me is just so much better on an Android-based player that's the direction I would go. I think this thing actually even sounds better just because it's got a lower noise floor. But I don't know, if you're interested in a non-Android-based audio player and you want one that is nice, small, and compact, still built well, it's not a bad player. It's got some shortcomings, but I don't know. Out of 5 stars, I'm going to give the Hidizs AP80 Pro Max, right? That's right. I'm going to give it 3 stars out of 5. It is a good little audio player. I don't think it really makes sense at its price at 240 bucks, but if you want to check it out, of course, I'll have it linked in the description down below. And while you're down there, if you haven't yet, please do hit the like button. There's my thumb again. Subscribe to the channel, ding the YouTube bell, join me on Discord, also linked in the description, and I'll catch you in the next super review. Cheers.
Join with the force of reviews. We now have the tools to brave the misleading world of audio fools. Hey, this review is super, and so are you. Grab your headphones, sniff a graph, and share your thoughts in this pursuit.